Brielle adjusted the bracelets on the counter, her fingers trembling as she glanced at the clock. Another exhausting shift. She never expected that today would change her life forever. Just as she turned around, a deep, confident voice stopped her in her tracks. "You work hard, don't you?" She looked up, straight into the piercing blue eyes of Ethan Lancaster, the billionaire CEO of Lancaster Enterprises. Why was the most powerful man in the city watching her? And why did his gaze hold something more than curiosity, something like admiration? Brielle's hands were full, literally. A customer had just left, and she was rushing to restock the jewelry stand when someone brushed past her. She stumbled. A firm grip caught her wrist. "Careful." She looked up, startled. Ethan Lancaster. She'd seen him on the news, gracing Forbes covers, attending galas with his elegant fiancée, Veronica Sinclair. But why was he here? Thank you," she mumbled, stepping back. Ethan tilted his head. "You work here?" Brielle raised an eyebrow. "That obvious?" A smirk played on his lips. "I meant you look different. Like you actually care about what you do." Brielle blinked. "Of course I do. It's my job." Ethan watched her with an unreadable expression. Then, before she could say more, Veronica appeared. Heels clicking, lips pursed. "Ethan, darling, why are you talking to?" She flicked her gaze at Brielle. "Staff." Brielle clenched her jaw. Ethan's smirk disappeared. "Veronica." His voice was sharp. "Go wait in the car." Her eyes widened. "Excuse me." Ethan didn't look at her. His gaze was still on Brielle. Brielle swallowed. This wasn't normal. She was just a seller at a mall. So why did Ethan Lancaster seem intrigued by her? As Veronica stormed off, Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a card. "Brielle." She froze. "How do you know my name?" He simply handed her the card. "Call me if you ever want something more than this." She stared at the card. His personal number. The CEO of Lancaster Enterprises was offering her. What? And why did it feel like this was only the beginning? Brielle never thought a regular day at work would turn into something life-changing. A billionaire CEO, Ethan Lancaster, not only noticed her but seemed intrigued. His arrogant fiancée, Veronica, dismissed her, but Ethan didn't care. And now, he handed Brielle his business card. Why? She wasn't special. Just a mall seller. So why did the most powerful man in the city want her to call him? Brielle sat in the small employee break room, staring at the sleek business card in her hand. Ethan Lancaster, CEO, Lancaster Enterprises. She exhaled sharply. This has to be a mistake. Brielle. Her friend and co-worker, Mia, rushed in, eyes wide. "Girl, I saw what happened. The Ethan Lancaster. Giving you his card." Brielle shoved it in her pocket. "It's nothing. Just a business thing." Mia folded her arms. "Right. Because billionaires randomly give business cards to mall sellers." Brielle groaned. "It doesn't mean anything." Mia smirked. "Tell that to Veronica's face. She looked like she wanted to murder you." Brielle shivered at the memory. Why did Ethan even bother with her? Meanwhile, Ethan leaned against his luxury car, staring at his phone. Veronica sat beside him, scrolling through her social media. "Honestly, Ethan, why did we even go to that mall? It's so common." He ignored her. His mind was somewhere else. Brielle. She wasn't like the people in his world. Fake smiles, greedy eyes. She was real, loyal. And he couldn't stop thinking about her. Later that night, Brielle paced her tiny apartment. She glanced at the card again. Should I call? Well, stupid idea. Before she could overthink, her phone rang. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello." A deep voice sent shivers down her spine. "Brielle. It's Ethan." Her breath hitched. How did you get my number?" He chuckled. "I have my ways." She swallowed. "Why are you calling me?" Because I can't stop thinking about you." Brielle's heart pounded. This was dangerous. This was insane. And yet, why did her fingers tighten around the phone, waiting for his next words? Brielle clutched her phone, her breath unsteady. She wanted to say something, anything, but her throat was dry. Ethan's voice was smooth, calm. "Are you still there?" She swallowed. "This doesn't make sense." "What doesn't?" "You. Calling me. Thinking about me." Ethan chuckled. "I'm not in the habit of lying, Brielle." She exhaled, shaking her head. "You're a billionaire. I'm a mall seller. This is ridiculous." His voice dropped lower. "Maybe. But it doesn't change the fact that I meant what I said." Her heart pounded. She needed to end this, before it got out of control. "I should go," she whispered. Meet me." Her stomach flipped. "What?" "I want to see you again." Brielle hesitated. Every part of her screamed no. But her lips betrayed her. "Where?" Meanwhile, Veronica scrolled through her phone in frustration. Ethan had been distant all evening. Distracted. And when she saw him step out onto their penthouse balcony, phone in hand, speaking in a tone she had never heard before, she knew something was wrong. Who was he talking to? And more importantly, why was he smiling? Brielle stood at the edge of a quiet cafe, hands gripping the strap of her purse. She shouldn't be here. She shouldn't have agreed. But then a sleek black car pulled up and the door opened. Ethan stepped out, his piercing blue eyes locking onto hers. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he smiled. "You came." Brielle's fingers twitched at her sides. She had a choice: step back into her normal life or take one dangerous step forward. And as Ethan reached out his hand, she knew that whatever she chose, nothing would ever be the same again. A mall seller and a billionaire CEO. Two completely different worlds. Yet, Ethan Lancaster couldn't stop thinking about Brielle. Despite her doubts, she agreed to meet him. As she waited outside the cafe, Ethan arrived, stepping out of his luxury car. And when he reached out his hand, she knew her life was about to change. But was she ready for it? Brielle's fingers twitched as she stared at Ethan's outstretched hand. She wasn't sure why she had come here. Maybe curiosity. Maybe something deeper. But now, standing in front of him, her heart pounded. Ethan smirked. "You look like you're deciding whether to run." She crossed her arms. "Maybe I am." He chuckled. "Then let me give you a reason to stay." With that, he opened the cafe door for her. Brielle hesitated, then stepped inside. They sat at a private booth in the quiet cafe. A warm glow from the dim lights made the atmosphere feel oddly intimate. Brielle sipped her coffee, avoiding Ethan's gaze. "This is crazy," she muttered. Ethan leaned forward. "Why?" She scoffed. "Because I'm just a mall seller and you're you." He smirked. "And who do you think I am?" She blinked. "A billionaire CEO with a fiancée." His expression darkened slightly. "Veronica is not the person I want to talk about right now." Brielle swallowed hard. "So what do you want?" she asked, barely above a whisper. Ethan exhaled, staring at her like she was the only person in the world. "You!" Her breath hitched. Meanwhile, Veronica paced inside Ethan's penthouse, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She had checked his schedule. He wasn't at a business meeting. Then where was he? Grabbing her phone, she dialed his number. Rang once. Voicemail. Her grip tightened around her phone. Something was definitely wrong. Back at the cafe, Brielle stared at Ethan in disbelief. "You want me," she whispered. Ethan smiled. "I don't think you realize how rare you are, Brielle." Her stomach flipped, but she forced herself to stay calm. "I don't belong in your world, Ethan." He leaned closer, his voice low. "Then let me bring you into it." She frowned. "What does that mean?" Ethan slid a small envelope across the table. She hesitated, then picked it up. Inside was a job offer. Her eyes widened. "You want me to work for you?" Ethan smirked. "I want you to work with me." Brielle's pulse raced. This wasn't just about a job. It was about him. She looked up, meeting his intense gaze. One choice, one decision, and her entire life could change. Did she dare step into his world? Brielle ran her fingers over the envelope, her mind spinning. She looked up at Ethan. Why me? He smiled, leaning back in his seat. Because I see something in you, Brielle. Something real. Her heart pounded. This wasn't just a job. It was an invitation into his life. But accepting it meant stepping into a world where she didn't belong. Did she really want that? At the penthouse, Veronica's patience ran out. She grabbed her assistant's arm. Find out where Ethan is. Now. Within minutes she had an answer. Faye. With a woman. Veronica's fingers curled into fists. Whoever she was. She had no idea who she was messing with. Back at the cafe, Ethan watched Brielle's hesitation. He leaned forward. You don't trust me, she sighed. It's not that. Then what? She looked at him, eyes filled with doubt. I don't know if I'm ready for all of this. Ethan smirked. Then let me make it easy for you. He pulled out his phone. Give me 1 month. Work with me. If you hate it, you walk away. Brielle bit her lip. And if I don't hate it? His voice softened. Then we figure out what happens next. Brielle inhaled deeply. 1 month. What did she have to lose? She met his gaze. Fine. 1 month. Ethan smiled. You won't regret it. As Brielle shook his hand, she had no idea. That saying yes had just changed her entire destiny. And somewhere across the city, Veronica was on her way. Brielle stood outside the massive glass skyscraper, her heart pounding. This wasn't the mall. This was another universe. She took a deep breath and walked in. Employees in sleek suits passed her, whispering, Is that her? The CEO's new personal assistant. She's so normal. Brielle swallowed hard. She wasn't ready for this. Then she saw him. Ethan stood near the elevator, dressed in a crisp navy suit. His blue eyes locked onto her. He smirked. You showed up. She lifted her chin. I said I would. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Nervous. She scoffed. No. He chuckled. Liar. The elevator doors opened. He held out his hand. She hesitated. Then slowly she placed her hand in his. The touch sent a spark up her arm. She quickly pulled away. But Ethan just smiled like he felt it too. Meanwhile, at Veronica's penthouse, she sat with a glass of wine, scrolling through pictures on her phone. Photos of Brielle. Her lips curled. This girl thinks she can take my place, she muttered. She dialed a number. I want everything on Brielle Carter. Her past, her weaknesses, everything. Her nails tapped against the glass. And if she has secrets, I want them exposed. Back at the office, Brielle sat in Ethan's private office, overwhelmed by her new role. He walked in, sleeves rolled up, looking exhausted but still ridiculously attractive. Rough first day, he asked. She groaned. I feel like I've been thrown into a lion's den. He smirked. Welcome to my world. She sighed. I don't belong here, Ethan. He moved closer, his voice softer. Who told you that? She looked up, eyes filled with doubt. I'm just a seller from a mall. I'm nothing special. Ethan frowned. Brielle. He lifted her chin gently, forcing her to meet his gaze. You are everything special. Her breath hitched. For the first time she saw something in his eyes. Something deeper than attraction. Something real. Ethan's thumb brushed against her cheek. His touch lingering. Brielle's heart pounded. But before anything could happen, Ethan's phone buzzed. He checked the screen. His expression hardened. Veronica. Brielle pulled back. The moment shattered. Ethan sighed. I need to take this. Brielle nodded, stepping away. But as she left his office, one thought wouldn't leave her mind. What was she doing? And why did it feel like she was already falling for him? Brielle stepped into Ethan's world, But with every step, she was falling deeper. Ethan was pulling her closer, making her feel things she never expected. But just as she started to trust him, Veronica lurked in the shadows, ready to strike. Now the battle between love and power had begun. And Brielle was right in the middle of it. Rain poured down as Brielle stood outside Lancaster Industries, waiting for a taxi. But none came. She hugged herself, her thin coat doing nothing against the cold. A black luxury car pulled up beside her. The window rolled down. "Ethan." "Brielle, get in," he said, his voice smooth but firm. She hesitated. "I can wait." His blue eyes darkened. "I won't ask twice." The way he said it sent a shiver down her spine, one that had nothing to do with the rain. She slipped into the car. The warmth wrapped around her instantly, but it was Ethan's presence that truly made her breathless. As the car pulled away, he glanced at her. "You should have called me," he murmured. She frowned. "I'm not your responsibility." His jaw tightened. "You think I'd let you stand in the rain like a stranger?" She swallowed. Why did his care feel so real? The car hit a bump, and Brielle lost balance. Ethan caught her. His hand landed on her thigh, firm, warm. She froze. He didn't move his hand. Didn't let go. Her breath hitched as she looked at him. The air between them shifted, thick with something unspoken. She struggled to find words. Ethan's gaze dropped to her lips, just for a second. But she saw it, felt it. Then, slowly, he pulled his hand away. But the damage was done. Her skin still burned where he touched her. Elsewhere, Veronica sat across from a private investigator. A folder slid across the table toward her. "She's clean," the investigator said. Veronica's nails tapped against her glass of wine. "Impossible. No one is clean." He hesitated. "There's one thing." She leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "Tell me." The investigator hesitated, then whispered something. Veronica's lips curled into a wicked smile. "Oh, Brielle," she murmured. "You have no idea what's coming." Ethan's car stopped outside Brielle's apartment. She hesitated, hand on the door handle. "Brielle." Ethan's voice was softer now. He turned back. He studied her for a long moment. "Do you regret saying yes?" "To what?" "To working with me." She swallowed. "No." Ethan nodded. But there was something in his eyes. Something vulnerable. Like her answer meant more than she realized. She stepped out into the rain, her heart racing. But as she walked inside, she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't just falling for Ethan Lancaster. She was already his. And that terrified her. Inside the car, Ethan sighed, rubbing his temples. He didn't just want her working for him. He wanted her. Truly. Deeply. Dangerously. But he also knew. If he kept her close, he might not be able to let her go. And with Veronica watching, that could destroy them both. The next morning, Brielle walked into Lancaster Industries, feeling different. The way Ethan had looked at her last night. It was still lingering in her mind. But she couldn't afford distractions. She sat at her desk, her fingers flying over the keyboard when a text from Ethan popped up on her phone. "Ethan, come to my office." Her heart skipped. Was she in trouble? Swallowing hard, she made her way up. Ethan stood by the window, his back to her. "Sit." She obeyed, nervous. Then he turned, placing a small box in front of her. Her eyebrows furrowed. "What is this?" Ethan smirked. "Open it." With hesitant fingers, she lifted the lid, and gasped. Inside was a silver bracelet. Delicate yet stunning. "I can't accept this," she whispered. Ethan leaned forward, his voice low. "You can. And you will." Brielle's fingers trembled as she held it. Why did it feel like more than just a gift? Why did it feel like a claim? Brielle had just left Ethan's office when she saw her. Veronica. The woman exuded power, elegance, and something dangerous. And she was walking straight toward her. "You must be Brielle," Veronica said, a sharp smile on her lips. Brielle straightened. "And you must be Veronica." Slow chuckle. Clever girl. Then Veronica leaned in, whispering, I don't know what game you think you're playing, but Ethan is mine. Brielle's heart pounded. I work here. That's it. Veronica's eyes flickered to the bracelet on Brielle's wrist. Are you sure about that? Before Brielle could reply, Veronica smirked and walked away. Brielle swallowed hard. She should have been scared. But all she could think about was Ethan. Later that evening, Brielle stepped into the elevator, only for Ethan to follow. The doors shut. Silence. Then his voice low and firm. What did Veronica say to you? Brielle met his gaze. That you belonged to her. Ethan exhaled sharply, stepping closer. She's wrong. Brielle's pulse quickened. He moved again, trapping her between the elevator wall and his body. I don't belong to anyone. His voice was deep, almost dangerous. Her breath hitched. But if I did, he whispered, his fingers brushing her wrist, where the bracelet rested. It wouldn't be her. The elevator doors dinged. Brielle bolted out, heart racing. Because deep down she knew. She was already his. And the scariest part, she didn't want to run. Veronica stood outside the elevator watching them. Her fingers curled into fists. If Brielle thought she could steal Ethan, she had another thing coming. Because Veronica wasn't going to lose. Not this time. The next morning, Brielle arrived at work earlier than usual. As she settled at her desk, a warm coffee cup was placed in front of her. She blinked in surprise. Ethan. Figured you'd need one, he said casually, sliding into the chair across from her. Brielle frowned. You brought me coffee. Ethan smirked. I own this company. I can do whatever I want. Brielle took a sip, warmth spreading through her. It wasn't just the coffee. It was him. Later that evening, the city was drenched in rain. Brielle had gone to the rooftop for some fresh air when she heard footsteps. She turned, and there he was. Ethan. His navy suit was slightly wet from the drizzle, but he didn't seem to care. Couldn't find you at your desk, he said, stepping closer. Brielle smiled. I needed air. A gust of wind blew past, making her shiver. Without hesitation, Ethan slipped off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. Her breath hitched. You'll catch a cold, he murmured, his hands lingering on her arms. She looked up at him, blue eyes searching hers. The city lights blurred behind them. For a moment there was only them. Only this. A few nights later, Brielle was finishing work late when the sound of soft music filled the office. She turned, only to find Ethan standing there, holding out his hand. Dance with me, he said. Dance with me, he said. Brielle hesitated, then placed her hand in his. Slowly he pulled her close. They swayed under the dim office lights, the world outside forgotten. Brielle could hear his heartbeat, feel the warmth of his hands on her waist. She looked up, and Ethan was already watching her. Their faces were so close. Too close. Brielle. His voice was barely a whisper. Her breath caught. Would he kiss her? Did she want him to? God, yes. But just as he leaned in, her phone rang. The moment shattered. Ethan sighed, stepping back. But as Brielle answered, she knew one thing. This wasn't over. Not even close. Ethan watched Brielle walk away, his jaw tight. Tonight had been close. Too close. But the truth was undeniable. He didn't just care for her. He didn't just want her. He was falling for her. And this time he wasn't going to fight it. Not anymore. Brielle had just stepped out of the office when she saw it. A sleek black car waiting by the curb. The tinted window rolled down, revealing Ethan behind the wheel. He smirked. Need a ride? Brielle hesitated. You don't have to. I want to. His voice was softer this time. Her heart skipped a beat. She climbed in. As the car glided through the city streets, a comfortable silence settled between them. Then Ethan spoke. Why do you always look like you're ready to run? Brielle glanced at him, startled. What? He kept his eyes on the road, but his jaw tightened. Whenever I get close, you pull away. Her breath hitched. Because she didn't have an answer. 'Cause she was scared. Scared of what he made her feel. Scared of the way her heart raced when he looked at her like that. Instead of dropping her home, Ethan pulled up to a small, cozy cafe tucked away in a quiet street. Brielle frowned. What are we doing here? You look like you could use something sweet, he said, stepping out. She followed, half amused, half nervous. Inside, the cafe was warm, filled with the smell of coffee and fresh pastries. They took a corner booth, and Ethan ordered hot chocolate for her, without even asking. Brielle raised an eyebrow. How do you know I like hot chocolate? Ethan leaned back, smirking. I pay attention. A blush crept up her neck. As they sat there, something shifted between them. The air felt different, lighter, warmer. She laughed at something he said, and for the first time, Ethan didn't look like the cold CEO the world knew. He looked like a man falling in love. As they stepped out of the cafe, the night was quiet. Ethan walked her to the car, standing close. Too close. His fingers brushed against hers. A shiver ran through her. Brielle, he murmured, his voice low. She looked up, meeting his gaze. Everything about him screamed control, power. But right now, he looked vulnerable. Like he was waiting for her to make a move. Her breath caught. Slowly, his hand reached up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Her lips parted. The world around them faded. And just as he started leaning in, a loud car horn shattered the moment. Brielle jumped, stepping back. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. The moment was lost. Again. Ethan watched as Brielle fumbled with the car door, flustered. He clenched his fists. He wanted her. Not just for a moment. Not just as a passing attraction. He wanted her in every way possible. And this time, he wouldn't let her run. Not anymore. Ethan sat in his office, staring out the window. Last night had been too close. The way Brielle looked at him. The way she almost let him in. But then she pulled away. Again. A sharp knock on the door broke his thoughts. Liam, his best friend and business partner, stepped in. You look like hell, Liam said, smirking. Ethan scoffed. Thanks. Liam sat down, studying him. Let me guess, it's Brielle. Ethan didn't answer, but his silence spoke volumes. Liam chuckled. You're in deep, man. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. I don't just want her, Liam. He exhaled. I care about her. More than I should. Liam leaned back. Then do something about it. Ethan's jaw tightened. He would. Tonight. Brielle sat at her desk, staring at the same email for 10 minutes. Her mind was a mess. Last night, the cafe. Ethan's touch. She had felt it. Pull. The heat. The way the world disappeared when he was close. But she couldn't. She was just a seller, or at least that's how people still saw her. And Ethan. He belonged to a world she could never fit into. Her thoughts were interrupted by a message on her phone. Ethan, meet me on the rooftop. Her heart pounded. What did he want? Did she even want to know? God, yes. The rooftop was quiet, the sky painted with hues of gold as the sun set. Ethan stood near the railing, hands in his pockets. Brielle hesitated before stepping closer. You wanted to see me. Ethan turned, his eyes locking onto hers. I'm done waiting, Brielle. His voice was deep, firm. I've tried to be patient, to give you space. But I need to know. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. Do you feel it too? Brielle swallowed hard. Ethan, His hand reached up, brushing against her cheek. Her breath caught. Because I can't stop thinking about you, he admitted. And I won't pretend anymore. Tears burned in her eyes. This was real. Unstoppable. But before she could answer, a loud voice interrupted them. Ethan. Brielle turned, and her blood ran cold. Veronica. His ex-fiancée stood there, arms crossed, eyes burning with rage. And in her hand, folder. Brielle's chest tightened. Something told her that whatever was inside could destroy everything. Ethan's jaw clenched. Brielle's heart pounded. And Veronica, he smirked. You really thought you could replace me that easily? What was in the folder? What game was Veronica playing? And would Ethan and Brielle's love survive the storm? Veronica stepped forward, her heels clicking against the rooftop floor. She held up the folder, waving it slightly. You really thought you could replace me that easily, Ethan? Brielle felt her stomach twist. She could feel Ethan's body tense beside her. What do you want, Veronica? Ethan's voice was sharp but controlled. Veronica smirked. Oh, I don't know. Maybe just to show you who Brielle really is. She tossed the folder at Ethan's feet. It slid open, revealing Brielle's employment contract. Confusion flickered across Ethan's face. That's it, he said, unimpressed. Veronica let out a cold laugh. You don't get it, do you? She turned to Brielle, eyes burning. Tell him the truth. Tell him why you're really here. Brielle's pulse pounded. I don't know what you're talking about. Veronica's smirk deepened. You were supposed to be my little spy, weren't you? Ethan's brows furrowed. What? Veronica crossed her arms. Didn't you wonder why a random mall seller got promoted so quickly? Why she ended up working so close to you? She turned back to Brielle. You were supposed to report back to me, weren't you? Brielle gasped. That's a lie. I would never. Then why did I arrange for you to get the job? Veronica cut in, her voice smug. I pulled the strings, sweetheart. You were supposed to be on my side. Ethan's gaze snapped to Brielle. For the first time, doubt flickered in high. Brielle shook her head, tears forming. Ethan, please. I didn't know. She might have helped me get the job, but I never worked for her. I never betrayed you. Silence. Brielle's heart ached. Would he believe her? Or had Veronica won? Ethan bent down, picking up the folder. He scanned it quickly. Then, without hesitation, he ripped it in half. Veronica's smug smile vanished. What are you doing? Ethan's eyes never left Brielle's. Warm. Certain. I don't need a damn piece of paper to tell me who Brielle is. His voice was calm, steady. I know her. Brielle felt her heart stutter. He believed her. Ethan took a step closer to Brielle, cupping her face gently. I don't care how you got here, Brielle. All I care about is... Do you want to be here? Tears spilled down her cheeks. Yes, she whispered. More than anything. Ethan smiled, the kind of smile that melted everything else away. Then he leaned in, and finally kissed her. A kiss filled with everything they had fought for. A kiss that sealed their love. A kiss that told the world they had won. A grand event hall, filled with celebration. Brielle stood near the stage, wearing a stunning gown, not as a guest, but as the company's new vice president. People whispered, admired. The former mall seller was now a boss. But that wasn't even the best part. Because as the music played, Ethan approached her, dressed in a sharp black tuxedo, and in his hands, a ring. Brielle's breath caught as he went down on one knee. I fell in love with you when you were just a girl selling perfumes in a mall, Ethan said, his voice full of love. And I'd do it all over again if it meant standing here today. Tears welled in Brielle's eyes. Brielle, will you marry me? A moment of silence. Then, with a breathless laugh, she whispered, yes. The crowd erupted in cheers. And as Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, Brielle knew. She had found her true home. Not in wealth, not in status, but in the arms of the man who had chosen her, against all odds.